The Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the most enduring and complex conflicts in the world. It has spanned over a century, involving numerous wars, uprisings, and peace efforts that have all left their mark on the region. Its roots lie in the early 20th century, during a time of rising nationalism and political turmoil. The Middle East was a region of great strategic importance, and various powers sought to exert their influence over it. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire after World War I created a power vacuum in the Middle East. This vacuum was quickly filled by European colonial powers, particularly the British and the French, who carved up the region according to their interests. Both Jews and Arabs saw an opportunity to assert their claims to the land. The Jewish community, driven by the Zionist movement, sought to establish a homeland in what they considered their ancestral territory. For Jews, the land held deep religious and historical significance. It was the site of ancient kingdoms and the location of sacred religious sites, making it central to Jewish identity and history. The Zionist movement, which began in the late 19th century, gained momentum in the early 20th century. It sought to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, a goal that was supported by many Jews around the world. For Arabs, the land was their home. They had lived there for centuries, developing a rich culture and strong community ties. The idea of a Jewish state threatened their way of life and their claims to the land. Palestinian Arabs had established their own communities and culture with deep roots in the land. They viewed the influx of Jewish immigrants and the Zionist movement as a direct threat to their existence and sovereignty. The British, who gained control of Palestine after World War I, faced the difficult task of balancing the competing claims of these two groups. Their policies often shifted, trying to appease both sides but ultimately satisfying neither. The Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which the British government expressed support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, further complicated the situation. It was seen by Jews as a promise and by Arabs as a betrayal. It fueled tensions between Jewish and Arab communities, ultimately leading to violence and displacement. Riots and clashes became more frequent, with both sides suffering casualties and losses. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which followed the declaration of the State of Israel, resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and the beginning of a conflict that continues to this day. The war marked a significant turning point, creating a refugee crisis and setting the stage for future hostilities. The war left deep scars on both sides and sowed the seeds for future conflicts. The legacy of 1948 is still felt today, with both Israelis and Palestinians continuing to grapple with the consequences of that pivotal year. At the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict lie three fundamental issues: land, security, and self-determination. These issues are not just political but deeply personal, affecting the lives of millions on both sides. These issues are deeply intertwined and have fueled decades of mistrust, violence, and failed peace negotiations. The history of this conflict is long and complex, with each attempt at peace often leading to further complications and setbacks. Land is a central point of contention. The land in question is not just any land, it is a region rich in history, culture, and religious significance for both Jews and Arabs. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim the same territory as their own. This overlapping claim has led to numerous confrontations and a deeply entrenched territorial dispute. For Israelis, the land holds historical and religious significance, and is seen as essential for their security. The connection to the land is deeply rooted in Jewish history and religious tradition, making it a non-negotiable aspect of their national identity. For Palestinians, it is their ancestral homeland from which many were displaced. The memory of displacement and the longing for return are powerful forces in Palestinian society, driving their quest for justice and recognition. Security is paramount for both sides. The need for security has shaped the policies and actions of both Israelis and Palestinians, often leading to a cycle of violence and retaliation. Israel, having faced numerous wars and terrorist attacks, prioritizes its defense and seeks to control borders and prevent attacks. The constant threat of violence has led to a heavily militarized society, with significant resources devoted to defense. Palestinians, living under occupation or in besieged areas, experience daily insecurity, restrictions on movement, and the threat of violence. The impact of these conditions on daily life is profound, affecting everything from education to healthcare. The right to self-determination is at the core of the conflict. Both peoples seek the right to govern themselves and determine their own futures, free from external control. Both Israelis and Palestinians aspire to govern themselves in their own independent states. This aspiration is a fundamental human right, yet achieving it has proven to be extraordinarily difficult. Israel achieved statehood in 1948, but the Palestinian quest for an independent and sovereign state remains unfulfilled. The creation of Israel was a momentous event for Jews worldwide, but it also marked the beginning of a long and painful struggle for Palestinians. These core issues are complex and emotionally charged, with each side harboring deep-seated narratives of historical injustice and suffering. The stories of individuals and families on both sides highlight the human cost of the conflict. Resolving these issues is crucial for achieving a just and lasting peace. It requires not only political agreements but also a deep understanding and empathy for the experiences and aspirations of both peoples. Only through mutual recognition and respect can a sustainable solution be found. The year 2024 marked a significant escalation in the Israel-Palestine conflict, a conflict that has been simmering for decades, with periodic eruptions of violence and attempts at peace that have often ended in failure. On October 7, 2023, Hamas, the militant group that controls the Gaza Strip, launched a surprise attack on Israel, an event that would set the stage for the intense confrontations that followed. The attack, unprecedented in scale and ferocity, involved a coordinated assault on Israeli towns and military installations near the Gaza border. This was not just a random act of violence but a meticulously planned operation aimed at inflicting maximum damage. Hamas fighters infiltrated Israeli territory, killing civilians and abducting soldiers and civilians. The brutality of the attack shocked the world and drew immediate condemnation from the international community. The attack sent shockwaves through Israel and triggered immediate and forceful retaliation from the Israeli military. The Israeli Defense Forces quickly mobilized, launching a series of airstrikes and ground operations aimed at neutralizing the threat. Israel launched a massive air and ground offensive against Hamas targets in Gaza, aiming to cripple the group's military capabilities and deter future attacks. The scale of the Israeli response was immense, involving thousands of troops and extensive use of air power. The Israeli response, however, resulted in significant civilian casualties and widespread destruction in Gaza. The densely populated enclave, already suffering from years of blockade and economic hardship, was plunged into a deeper humanitarian crisis. Residential buildings, infrastructure, and medical facilities were hit, leading to a humanitarian crisis in the densely populated enclave. Hospitals struggled to cope with the influx of injured civilians and essential services were disrupted. The 2024 escalation marked a turning point in the conflict, further entrenching both sides and dimming hopes for a negotiated settlement. Experts noted that the cycle of violence seemed unbreakable, with each side more determined than ever to achieve its goals through force. It underscored the deep-seated mistrust and animosity that permeate relations between Israelis and Palestinians. Protests erupted in both Israel and Gaza, with civilians on both sides expressing their frustration and despair over the seemingly endless conflict. International leaders called for restraint and renewed efforts for peace, but the path to a lasting resolution appeared more elusive than ever. The United Nations held emergency meetings, and peace talks were proposed, but the deep-rooted issues remained unresolved. Amidst the chaos, the lives of ordinary people, especially children, were profoundly affected. In both Gaza and Israel, families struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy, even as the conflict raged around them. The human cost of the conflict was a stark reminder of the urgent need for a peaceful solution. The Gaza Strip, home to over 2 million Palestinians, has been plunged into a humanitarian catastrophe following the 2024 escalation. The Israeli military offensive, while targeting Hamas infrastructure, has had a devastating impact on civilian lives and infrastructure. Airstrikes and artillery fire have destroyed homes, hospitals, schools, and essential infrastructure. The healthcare system, already fragile, is on the verge of collapse. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, and there are critical shortages of medical supplies, clean water, and electricity. The blockade of Gaza, imposed by Israel and Egypt since Hamas took control in 2007, has exacerbated the crisis. The blockade restricts the flow of goods, humanitarian aid, and people into and out of Gaza, severely impacting the lives of ordinary Palestinians. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire and continues to deteriorate. International organizations have issued urgent appeals for a ceasefire and increased humanitarian assistance. The plight of Gazan civilians highlights the human cost of the conflict and the urgent need for a political solution. The Israel-Palestine conflict, well, it's not just a simple dispute over land, it's deeply rooted in history, politics, and religion. And, each side has its own perspective, its own narrative. The role of international actors like the United Nations, the United States, and neighboring countries adds layers of complexity. They have tried to mediate, sometimes with success, but often, the situation remains tense. So it's essential to understand that any resolution requires addressing not just the immediate issues, but also the underlying causes. Economic disparities, historical grievances, and security concerns all play a part. And as we dive deeper, we'll see how these factors have shaped the ongoing struggle and the efforts toward peace. Both Israelis and Palestinians have endured immense trauma and loss. Families on each side have been torn apart by violence, leaving scars that span generations. The pain experienced by individuals and communities is profound, and it fuels the ongoing cycle of conflict. The two-state solution has long been proposed as a way to achieve peace. It envisions an independent state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, living in peace and security. However, the path to this solution is fraught with obstacles, and many question whether it is still viable given the current realities on the ground. The challenges are deep-rooted and complex. Issues such as borders, the status of Jerusalem, security concerns, and the rights of refugees remain unresolved. These challenges are compounded by political divisions and a lack of trust between the parties involved. Despite the uncertainty, there is hope. Many individuals and organizations are working tirelessly to bridge divides and foster understanding. Grassroots movements and international efforts continue to seek a peaceful resolution, believing that a better future is possible for both Israelis and Palestinians.